You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christi and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Dodge Movie Podcast. This is episode 113, and we are talking about the 2009 Wonderful World. It is directed and written by Joshua Goldin. This was his directorial debut. It stars Matthew Broderick, Sana Lathan, Michael Kenneth Williams, Philip Baker Hall, Jesse Tyler Ferguson, Jodelle Ferland, and Ali Walker. The DP was Daniel Schulman. It was filmed in Shreveport, Louisiana. The synopsis for this film: Ben Singer has a cynical worldview darkened by his roommate Ibu's sudden medical situation, though the arrival of Ibu's sister Khadi might remedy both men's ills. The tagline for this film is, "If the glass is half empty, at least you can't drown."
Okay, actually, as a tagline, that really captures the character that Broderick plays.
Yes, it does. I liked it. And the other tagline is, "Happiness is a state of mind."
No.
I like the first one.
Yeah, the first one, it really catches the spirit of the film and catches your ear.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is just like a poster with a kitten on it. Who cares?
Right. So this film only had a 23-day production schedule. This film is very indie. I mean, it falls in, it's labeled, I'm going to jump ahead. It's labeled as a comedy, drama, romance. So if we call it a rom-com,
No.
and with the budget, we didn't argue about this, but we discussed this after we watched it. I feel that he is different because of Khadi's love, but you said no.
Yeah, I don't feel like his love for her transformed him.
So, but something transformed him. So was it almost losing his friend Ibu?
I'm not even sure he's really that much different. The only thing that's different is he plays music again in front of children.
I did my due diligence, and both Matthew and the director said this is a film about hope, and you took umbrage with that.
Yeah, that's a film about hope, like Schindler's List is a film about singing and dancing. No, there's no hope in here. I'm sorry, I don't know what they were saying.
Okay, kick us off with your pickup line. Let's see if that tracks.
Okay, the pickup line is latte and mocha, and I had to go back twice and still turn on the subtitles to understand the dialogue being said. But one of Broderick's co-workers is bringing coffees to this small table where all the proofreaders sit and proofread.
Is that a common, was that like a publishing company?
It's supposed to be a law firm, I think, because later on when Joe loses his job, the butthole that fires him says, like, you were a few hours late on something on a Friday and we lost a $10 million account, so you're fired. And just immediately that bumped me, because if there's $10 million on the line, there is no way that they're going to let one proofreader be the thing between them and success. That doesn't, I mean, they would be morons if that was the case. They wouldn't have still been in business if they were that bad at scheduling their work. It was important for him to be fired, but I just thought the justification didn't land for me.
Mm-hmm. The film opens up. We see he doesn't really like his job. He picks up his kid. It's unclear, but it feels like she's not super excited to go with her dad. And then when we meet his ex-wife, she's like, "What did you do?" He's just a giant bummer.
The viewers aren't super excited to go with her dad. So, I mean, we kind of sympathize with the girl.
He goes to a stand-up show with a coworker, but doesn't really laugh, doesn't really enjoy it. He almost is like...
There's a line where Broderick's character, which I forget his name, but he says...
His coworker's name?
No, what's Matthew Broderick's character's name?
Ben.
Ben says, "I don't know what I'm doing here. I hate stand-up comedy." Right. Which is like, oh, okay. That actually accurately describes that character. He hates laughing.
And so I couldn't tell, was he just like a complete pessimist grump, or was he a little bit on the spectrum? Because his daughter takes him to the hospital to see Ibu, who she obviously knows because that's his roommate. And she says something about, is he dreaming? And he says he's not dreaming. He's a meat puppet.
Yes.
Which is really crass about your friend who is in the hospital, like in a coma.
That's a good thing. A good point. I hadn't really thought if he was on the spectrum, if that explains some of his, what do you call it? Antipathy, misanthropy, however you say that. He hates humanity.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't feel like Sheldon Cooper, where he just kind of...
Right, where he's just ignorant of social cues.
Right.
This is, he very much has a negative thing. And as we find out later, he's upset because his passion project album was not advertised by his label.
Right.
So he somehow holds that against the world.
Yeah, he was kind of like, I took it that he was like a Raffi.
Yes. That certainly the CD cover and the music he plays at the end, it makes us sing a little bit like that. Although the song he plays is, I think, a little more sophisticated than the stuff that we know from Raffi.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see how an artist would maybe be upset that the label didn't support him, but I think he would then get disillusioned with the record label and not with everything in life.
Right. Yeah, he just has a tough time because then he gets fired and Ibu's sister comes. And so it's kind of like a stranger in his apartment, and he stays up late, and then he ends up being like a pizza delivery guy. And he realizes, he goes to pick up his daughter one time, and the mom says she's at a friend's house. She did a sleepover, and then he sees her curtain move in her bedroom. So he's like, oh, shoot. Like, he knows that basically the daughter doesn't want to see him.
And she's obviously never read The Diary of Anne Frank because she moves the curtains. Yeah, everyone knows you don't move the curtains when they're out front. Got to keep a low profile. Yeah. So, but that was the thing to me is he seemed to be this entirely pessimistic person, right? But then his roommate snores horribly, which is why he's up late. And he never seems to have any problem with his roommate. So that kind of didn't make sense to me. He's going off about all the problems in the world, but he doesn't grump at his roommate. That was a little odd.
I didn't get the sense that he was up late because of the roommate. I thought he was like almost just like an insomniac. He just couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
But then what do you make of the sister says she has to leave because she can't afford to stay. And so he leaves and he comes back and he hands her a big fat envelope of money. And he said, Ibu wanted me to give you this to you. It's from his safe deposit box. He would want you to have it. And then later we see that and it was like $2,000. It was a lot of money. We later see a receipt that that's his money that he gave her to stay.
Yeah, I don't think that character had $2,000 in a bank account.
Well, it could have been in like a savings account from when he, like maybe his first, because he was known at some point, like his first record or something, because people knew him.
Right. I guess if any of our listeners are children's music producing musicians, they should call in and tell us how much coin they're rolling in. But
I think Rafi's doing pretty good.
Rafi is, but I don't know if his contemporaries are. I actually made a note of, I was a little concerned about the ethics of him having some boom boom sexy time with this woman who is financially dependent on him while his roommate, her brother, is in the hospital in a coma. That made me feel a little bit uncomfortable that she basically was dependent on him for like food, shelter, and clothing. I was a little uncomfortable with that plot line.
That's interesting because I felt like I was picking up on they were getting feelings for one another. Because like even I wrote in my notes about when he brought her the money, it was obviously he was having feelings for her and he wanted her to stay. And I don't think he paid her to have sex with him. I think they were two people who were falling for one another.
I think that's maybe where I didn't track that. I think Broderick did such a good job of making this guy seem miserable that it was hard for me to think that she would want to spend time with this. No, I didn't want to spend time with this guy. He was just so pessimistic and negative and just miserable to be around. And I say this as a cynic, right?
I liked Khadi too. She, at one point she said, you don't believe in magic, but magic is everywhere. She said, we both love him, which I think she meant Ibu. And And she was just I felt like she was kind of encouraging him to tap into like the person that would write children's songs, right? You cannot be the person who he is, who we meet at the beginning, and write a happy children's song about a baby beluga.
So I like this twist because there have been several films that have talked about a clown being miserable that's and an alcoholic and whatever. But this is the first time I've seen somebody take that twist on a children's, because what could be happier than a guy who plays funny songs for kids, right? Well, in this case, that guy is not funny at all, not happy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting premise, I have to say. And I liked how they used the chess in the kitchen as a way to get the two characters in the two shot, but give them an excuse to basically give exposition or talk about other things.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was believable. They could talk about anything and you would believe it as a viewer because they're playing chess. They're just kind of making talk, while they're playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I felt too, like you didn't see the daughter come around, but like when they ran out of gas and she was like, "It's okay, Dad, it's an adventure." I felt like she was starting to turn a little bit. Like,
yeah, I think the way that character is written and the way that actress played it, she was kind of saw her dad in a different light.
And I think too, and I felt this with my dad, they don't know what to do with a small child. I think especially a girl. And so it was like, you want to go to a hockey game? And then there was something else they would go do. It was like the two things they would go do.
She liked hockey. And so he said something about skating.
Oh, you want to go ice skating? That's what it was.
And she's like, well, I like hockey. I don't play hockey.
Right.
But then they went to this music store.
Right.
And so I was curious if any of your deep dives on interviews with the filmmakers, those guys in the music store, I felt like were actual musicians.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was listening. I found this 5-part interview, but unfortunately it was like somebody filming it with their cell phone in the, 28th row.
Yoy.
So the sound was horrible. So I only listened to some of it, but somebody did call out that they recognized a musician,
right.
And I didn't recognize that it wasn't Rafi.
And the way they shot it, Broderick was playing. Now that may not have been the sound from his guitar, but he actually was playing. So credit to Broderick.
I believe, he learned.
And I want to say that I think the problem wasn't with his performance. I think he landed the character perfectly. It's just the character to me
You didn't like
was unlikable. Like I just, I'm not rooting for him. And I think you can have a character who is an anti-hero and it works. It's just really hard. And I don't think this film landed for me, but it sounds like it landed a bit more for you.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a grumpy guy. And then because life had kind of, obviously he had gotten a divorce, so that affected him. And then hit the lack of his, the thing that brought him joy, that playing music, that didn't bring him success. And so I think he kind of felt like life, dealt him a hand and he just had given up kind of.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There's a line of dialogue that summarizes that very well. He says, "It's a shame to be so great at something no one cares about."
Mm-hmm.
And I think I didn't buy that premise, right? I felt like even if that album didn't sell well, he still, if he played music somewhere else, people in the music store loved his music. So it didn't land for me. It didn't make any sense why the character was that upset at the entire world.
Right. But is there a scenario where some artists can be content with just being in their art or showcasing their art, and some artists need the feedback, they need the accolades, they need the success, they need the...
Well, it could be, but that's what I was saying is if he went down to the middle school and played Baby Beluga, the entire auditorium would cheer. If he went to the music store and they were like, "Oh wow, that's great, you've got the Brazilian, let's jam." So to me, there was something missing that turned him into that character. For me, that Passion Project album not being promoted and selling 1 billion copies, it didn't track to me that he would become a person this negative, that he would lose everything, including his wife and his daughter.
Right. Then there was a scene that confused both of us. It felt like somebody cut out a scene
Right. There was maybe something missing.
It was a left turn that nobody saw coming. In fact, I started to worry, like, was I really, kind of looking up things so much that I missed a huge piece of story? And you were like, nope. Basically, he goes to Khadi and accuses her of falling for him and to try to trap him into getting a green card so she could stay in the States because she was from Senegal like her brother. And it wasn't just like, hey, are you sleeping with me so you can, it was anger, it was rage, and maybe it's fueled by everything else that didn't work in his life. But he was so sweet with her, and then he cared for her and brought it was out of the blue.
It's the equivalent of Tom Hanks getting to the top of the Empire State Building and punching Meg Ryan in the face.
It kind of was. And like you said, early on when Khadi first comes, she shares a photo or photos of her and Ibu. And she talks about how close they are and how he would always protect her. So we were just like, oh.
She even says he would take a big stick to people who were mean to her.
Right. So we're like, oh, when Ibu sees him. So the first time he walks in the hospital, I'm waiting for like a huge fight. Like Ibu to just tear into him.
Right.
And Ibu's just like, you have not been nice. And I was just like, oh my God, that's all you're going to say?
I didn't even get a you've not been nice. It was like nothing had happened. That really didn't track for me.
He said something like, Khadi is very angry at you. Or he said something like really chill. And it was just like, what?
So is that supposed to show us that Ben is this person who sabotages himself throughout his entire life, which is a valid narrative choice to make? It's just that character I don't respond to at all. I just don't have any interest in. So this is one of those cases where I feel like the filmmakers did a fine job with their budget and their constraints and everything. I didn't care for the story.
Yeah, like you said, I think I liked it a little bit better than you, but that last part. And so then Ibu dies and he accompanies the body back to Senegal. And then he takes his daughter to a hockey game and they're laughing. And then he asks her about his school and she says people are making fun of her. And so I guess that's supposed to show us that she's starting to open up to him. And then, like you said, the last scene, he's singing in front of the children again. So maybe the end felt a bit rushed, kind of like, oh, look, everybody ends happily ever after.
Yeah, there is just one little continuity thing that really took me out of the film. And our friend Dustin will maybe enjoy this as well. But the clock in Ibu's hospital room.
You and your clocks.
Yeah, the hour hand was halfway between 10 and 11, which would be 30 minutes. But the minute hand was right on the 12. How do you even make a clock like that? That was
I think that's why ridiculous. You miss some of the nuances of this film to enjoy it more, is because you're focusing too much on the clocks.
I can't help but not notice that. I'm sorry. So, yes, perhaps there was an important nuance I missed that would have made this entire thing. But, again, I don't know how to balance this because I didn't like that character at all. But this just kind of reminds me of First Cow. If the filmmaker made the film they wanted to make, I totally respect them for doing it. I don't think there was anything technically wrong, right? It just wasn't a story that I responded to that I would want to watch again, right? It's just not my bag. That character wasn't redeemable to me, right? And maybe the end scenes like you're talking about, showing him, talking to the kids or singing, I'm sorry, for the kids is supposed to be that redemption. Maybe that's where the filmmaker said that there was hope. Again, I didn't get it, but
that definitely landed more for me because I felt like he was starting to connect with his daughter. Was there even a scene with the ex-wife where she was maybe not as annoyed with him? But anyway, and then him playing in front of the children. I felt like that was his turn. And so we didn't get to see, it was the beginning of the happy ending maybe. And so that's...
Yeah, again, maybe that was the intent. And it was hard for me to get the taste of Ben out of my mouth.
Jeez. So a couple things under sound. I really enjoyed listening to the guitar because sometimes even when he wasn't playing, it was just like kind of the score that was under the film.
It was neat that they used that song throughout the rest of the film.
Mm-hmm. And then I really liked the subtlety because early in the film, I think when they were playing chess, so it gave an opportunity for it to be quote unquote quiet. You could hear a very distant dog barking. And then Ibu references it later.
Mm-hmm.
And he says there's something very familiar about it, kind of like a dog barking. And I was just like, oh, wow. I didn't even see that coming because I noticed it early, but it was just like, oh, okay, that's just good soundscapes, right? And if you're living in an apartment, there is going to be a distant dog barking and a distant siren and a distant car or a horn.
Right.
But then when he brought it back and spoke of it, I was just like, oh, that's some good filmmaking right there.
And also I credit to the cinematographer because there's a shot outside the Capital One building and he cleverly positioned a lamppost so it obscured the middle part of the Capital One logo so they didn't have to get clearance. I was like, yeah, way to go, independent filmmakers.
Was there head trauma in this film?
None that I made note of, but to me, it's implied when Ibu has a diabetic coma and he falls out of his bed.
Yeah.
He probably hit his head on the way down.
Very sad.
Yeah.
I know there was a Smoochie.
Smoochie.
Or two.
Yes, there was a Smoochie during Boom Boom Sexy Time between Ben and Khadi.
And then a driving review.
There's not a whole lot. The beginning of the movie establishes a conflict with a person trying to back out of their parking space and Ben's car's in the way, but that person is not doing a very good job of backing out of their parking space. And then I did notice at one point they were obviously on a process trailer because the view out the rear window when Ben drives Khadi does not match his steering wheel inputs. And it's kind of like it reminded me of the Police Squad gag with Leslie Nielsen where it wasn't that big, but there was a difference between him turning and the view turning. But that was no big deal. I don't think only people who notice clock hands would notice that one.
Right. Shall we go to the numbers?
Let's go to the numbers.
So like I said, filming took place over 21 days in Shreveport, Louisiana with a $3 million budget financed by the producer Miranda Bailey through Ambush Entertainment. It made its premiere on April 27th, 2009 at the Tribeca Film Festival. That's when it got picked up by Magnolia Pictures for distribution and was given a limited release in January of 2010. It garnered a mixed reception from critics over the script's unoriginality and numerous indie film cliches, but were universally positive towards Broderick's performance. I didn't understand that when I read it about the indie film cliches.
Yeah, I'm not real sure either, unless they felt like Garden State that Khadi was the manic pixie dream girl, but I didn't see that at all.
No.
I did think credit to her and the actress who played his daughter for the dance number. That was fun. They really captured like some fun there. Yeah,
that's why I loved Khadi's character, because to me, she kind of brought a little bit of fun, a little bit of whimsy, some heart, kind of everybody was just kind of dull and broken. And she brought like this sunshine, kind of. Huh. Okay, like I said, this was a $3 million budget. The IMDb score is 6.1 out of 10, so on the lowish side. Critics, like the stanza I read said, didn't really like it as much, 42%. So Rotten and audiences definitely agreed at 33%. It's right about an hour and a half. It's rated R. Like I said, it's a comedy, drama, romance. And it only made $9,000 because it only opened in 4 theaters. So I was curious about that being in 2009. It's not like it was...
They couldn't go to streaming yet.
Right. And so I was like, 4 theaters. And I do know that in order to be considered for the Oscars, you have to exhibit in at least like 4 or 5 certain theaters in LA in order to be considered for an Oscar. So I wonder if they just couldn't, although with Magnolia Pictures, I wonder if it aired on like HBO or something
IFC,
back then.
maybe.
Yeah. So I couldn't find the story behind that, why it was only in 4 theaters, but that makes sense because when I saw the that was my other little kind of bugaboo, that I did like this movie, but the trailer definitely sells it of not so much like a rom-com, but a little happier than it was. So, if you have a serious drama, go ahead and make your trailer.
It's an advertisement, so it should match kind of what the person's going to see. Yeah. And again, maybe because I thought Broderick was friends with the writer-director. So this could have just been a project that they're like, this was, we wanted to do this thing, and they didn't intend for it to make a ton of money and have a wide distribution. I don't know.
Right.
But I want to say, just because I didn't care for the story, I think those ratings are a little low. I mean, I don't think it was a bad film. I think, again, everybody I think technically it was fine.
Yeah.
And I do think Broderick really did well in being a miserable sad sack. He did a fantastic job of capturing that. I don't think he's like that as a person. So great acting, Matthew.
All right, everybody. We are midway through April, so be checking our social media for those clues to guess the theme so that you can win some prizes or some shout outs. And if anybody wants a Smoochie sticker, shoot me an email, or you can text me your address and I will send that to you free of charge because I just am so appreciative of all of our listeners. Check the show notes for all that information, and never forget,
Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christi and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.